Your brother's Scottsdale emergency matters more than your little ceremony. That was the text message sitting on my screen at 5:15 a.m. on the morning of my wedding. By sunrise, my mother and father were already boarded on a flight to Arizona with my older brother, Tyler. At 11 o'clock, when the string quartet began playing inside the conservatory, two velvet chairs in the front row sat completely empty, their custom calligraphied name cards resting against the silk cushions like headstones. I did not cancel the walk. I took the arm of a man I had known for exactly 4 weeks, my father-in-law, and walked down the aisle with my head held high. By Monday morning, a 30-second video of that walk had surpassed 2 million views online. By noon, my phone had 72 missed calls from my mother. Her latest voicemail lasted just 9 seconds. Callie, pick up your phone right now. Your father's senior vice president saw the video. He recognized the man walking you. What on earth have you done? My mother thought the viral clip was an embarrassment. What she didn't know was that by abandoning my wedding, my father had just disqualified himself from a $45 million municipal infrastructure contract and set off a financial audit that would uncover the $55,000 they stole from my grandmother's estate. I was 32 when I got married, and for as long as I could remember, I had been the family member who was expected to absorb the cost of keeping everyone else comfortable. I am an architectural lighting designer in Chicago. I spend my days calculating luminous flux, designing custom structural glass fixtures, and making sure luxury commercial spaces feel warm and inviting. It was ironic, considering how cold my own family had always been beneath the surface. My mother, Brenda, was a master of social appearances. She organized neighborhood charity drives, sent handwritten thank you notes within 12 hours, and possessed a quiet, venomous talent for making you feel selfish whenever you failed to hand over what she wanted. My father, Paul, was an executive accounts director for a major commercial electrical supplier. He hated conflict so deeply that he treated passivity as a virtue. If Brenda demanded that I give something up, my father would simply look at the floor, clear his throat, and say, "Let's just keep the peace, Callie." Then there was Tyler, my brother. 35 years old, charming, perpetually underemployed, and always 48 hours away from a game-changing real estate development. Whenever Tyler made a catastrophic financial gamble, my parents called it visionary ambition. When I graduated with honors from engineering school, paid off my student debt in 3 years, and launched an independent lighting design firm, my father called me practical. Growing up, the hierarchy was absolute. When I was 12, I had a solo cello performance at the Regional Youth Symphony. I had practiced 5 nights a week all winter. On the afternoon of the concert, Tyler broke his collarbone attempting a dirt bike jump. My parents spent the evening in urgent care, and my grandmother, Clara, sat alone in the 4th row of the auditorium. I still remember the scent of lavender on Grandma Clara's coat when she hugged me in the lobby. I kept staring past her shoulder at the 2 empty seats where my parents should have been. Grandma Clara had touched my cheek with her worn fingers and said, "Callie, never spend your life searching the room for the people who walked out. Look at the people who stayed." That advice became the anchor of my life. Grandma Clara passed away when I was 22. She was the one who taught me to budget every dollar, to hold my tongue until facts were on paper, and to never mistake being convenient for being loved. Then I met Julian Sterling. Julian was an environmental structural engineer. He was steady, fiercely protective, and possessed the rare quality of listening to understand rather than to react. We dated for 3 years, built a quiet life together in Lincoln Park, and never felt the need to broadcast our affairs to the world. 4 weeks before our wedding, I finally met his father, Arthur Sterling. Arthur was a silver-haired, unassuming man who wore worn flannel shirts on weekends and carried an easy, respectful warmth. I knew he was an attorney, but we spent our first dinner talking about mid-century architecture and native prairie restoration. The night before my wedding, at our rehearsal dinner, my mother barely looked at the floral centerpieces. Tyler stepped outside the restaurant 4 times to yell into his phone. My father checked his smartwatch every 6 minutes. When I asked if everything was all right, my mother smiled thinly and said, "Don't be dramatic, Callie, it's just family business." At 5:15 the next morning, the reality arrived in a text message. Tyler's private investment syndicate in Scottsdale had triggered a margin call. If my parents didn't fly out immediately to sign emergency personal loan guarantees, Tyler's shell company faced asset forfeiture. My mother texted, "Your brother's Scottsdale emergency matters more than your little ceremony. Boarding now. Have a lovely day." My father texted, "We'll celebrate properly when we get back, sweetheart. You know how Tyler gets when he's under pressure." I sat on the edge of my bed in the gray dawn light, looking at my white lace dress hanging against the wardrobe. I didn't scream. I didn't send angry paragraphs. I texted back one single word: understood. At 10:30 a.m., inside the bridal suite of the glass conservatory, my maid of honor, Sarah, was adjusting my veil when the wedding coordinator knocked gently on the door. "Callie," the coordinator whispered, her eyes full of careful sympathy. "The processional is beginning. Who is walking you down the aisle?" I looked through the glass doors. At the front of the center aisle, 2 velvet chairs with my parents' names written in gold script sat empty. The room felt suddenly devoid of air. Then Arthur Sterling stepped into the suite. He wore a crisp black tuxedo, his posture straight and calm. He didn't offer empty platitudes. He didn't say he was sorry my parents were absent. He simply extended his arm, looked me directly in the eyes, and said, "You can walk down that aisle alone as an independent woman, Callie, or you can take my arm. Either way, you are walking toward a room full of people who love you." I thought of Grandma Clara. Look at who stayed. I linked my arm through Arthur's. The double doors opened. The string quartet struck the first chords of the processional. 80 guests turned in their seats. I saw the sudden murmurs as people noticed the empty front row chairs. But as I locked eyes with Julian at the altar, a clean, unshakable calm settled over me. I smiled, not a forced smile for the cameras, but the real smile of a woman who had finally stopped waiting for people who were never going to show up. A junior assistant on our videography team captured the 40-second walk on a handheld camera. The video framed the empty seats, my measured steps, and Arthur's steady, respectful presence. By Sunday evening, that video had been reposted across 3 platforms. It wasn't shared because anyone knew who we were. It went viral because millions of people recognized the quiet dignity of a bride walking past the chairs of the people who abandoned her. By Monday morning, the clip hit 2.4 million views, and that was when my mother left 72 missed calls. Julian and I were sitting on the screened porch of a cabin in Door County when I finally took my phone off airplane mode. The voicemail from my mother wasn't asking about the ceremony. It was shrill, breathless, and frantic. "Callie, your father's executive vice president at Midwest Power and Lighting saw the video on LinkedIn. He recognized Arthur Sterling. You have to fix this immediately." I looked at Julian across the table. "Who is your father, Julian?" Julian set down his coffee mug with a slow, wry smile. "My dad is Arthur Sterling, Senior Managing Partner at Sterling, Hayes & Vance. He also serves as Special Counsel to the Regional Transit Authority Oversight Commission.
The pieces fell together with terrifying clarity.
My father, Paul, had spent the last 8 months leading Midwest Power's executive pursuit of a $45 million municipal transit lighting contract. That contract was overseen and audited by the exact regulatory commission where Arthur Sterling held final compliance sign-off. My father had spent years treating my life as insignificant. Because he had never bothered to ask about Julian's family beyond polite pleasantries, he had walked directly into a massive, undisclosed corporate ethics conflict. Before I could even process the news, an email arrived from my cousin, Lauren. Attached to the email were screenshots from a private family chat that had been active for 6 weeks. In the chat, Tyler was begging for $50,000 to float his Scottsdale condo scam. My mother had written, "We can liquidate the municipal bond Clara left in the family trust. Callie doesn't even know it exists." My father had replied, "Are you sure? Clara intended that for Callie's first home." My mother's final response burned into my eyes. "Callie won't push. She never asks for anything. Tyler needs the money now." Grandma Clara had left a $55,000 estate bond in an educational and housing subtrust. My parents had quietly liquidated it 40 days prior and wired the proceeds directly into Tyler's failing LLC. I walked down to the lakeshore, sat on the wooden dock, and watched the mist rise off the water. I didn't cry for the wedding. I cried for Grandma Clara, for the woman who had saved that money so I would never be dependent on someone else's terms. Julian joined me on the dock. "What do you want to do, Callie?" "I don't want a public shouting match," I said, wiping my eyes. "I'm handing the trust paperwork to an estate attorney, and I am letting the corporate consequences land exactly where my father placed them." The formal meeting occurred 48 hours later in the executive boardroom of Midwest Power and Lighting in downtown Chicago. The room had floor-to-ceiling glass overlooking the Chicago River. My father sat at the far end of the table, his face pale and sunken. My mother sat beside him in a tailored suit, clutching her leather purse like a shield. The executive vice president, Charles Vance, did not raise his voice. "Paul," Vance began, placing a manila folder flat on the glass table. "The Regional Transit Authority Ethics Board contacted our legal department yesterday morning. They flagged a major undisclosed family relationship between our lead bid director and the special counsel to the Oversight Commission." My father swallowed hard. "Charles, I had no idea Arthur Sterling was Julian's father. I didn't know—" "You didn't know your own daughter's father-in-law?" Vance interrupted, his tone laced with disbelief. "You were absent from the wedding. The entire industry saw the video." "It was a family emergency," my mother interjected defensively. "Our son was facing financial catastrophe in Arizona." "Your personal priorities are your own, Brenda," Vance said coldly. "However, the compliance appearance is catastrophic. Paul is officially recused from the $45 million RTA bid. The pursuit will be transferred to our alternate director immediately." My father slumped into his leather chair. For 10 years, that contract had been the crowning ambition of his corporate career. He had lost it because he couldn't be bothered to show up for his daughter. As we walked out into the corridor, my mother cornered me against the marble wall. "Why didn't you warn us who Arthur Sterling was, Callie? You knew what this contract meant to your father." I looked at the woman who had spent 32 years making me feel invisible. "You knew Julian's last name, Mom. You knew he was an engineer. If you wanted to know his family, you would have had to show up to the dinner. You would have had to care about my life when there was nothing in it for Tyler." She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing without a sound. 2 days later, Tyler showed up at our apartment in Lincoln Park. He looked unkempt and exhausted. The Scottsdale project had collapsed anyway. The lender had seized the unfinished units, and the $55,000 of Grandma Clara's money had vanished into legal fees. "You have to talk to Arthur,"
Tyler demanded, pacing our living room. He has connections in commercial debt restructuring. He can get the foreclosure paused. I stood by the kitchen counter, my arms folded. No, Tyler. Daniel's family has tens of millions, Tyler shouted. A $50,000 bridge loan is pocket change to them. Why are you hoarding resources while your own brother goes bankrupt? That wasn't pocket change, Tyler. That was Grandma Clara's estate bond, the $55,000 you and Mom stole from my inheritance trust. Tyler froze. Mom said you agreed to loan that to me.
You knew I didn't know, I said. And tomorrow morning, my estate attorney is serving Dad with a formal demand for full restitution to the trust. If the funds aren't returned in 30 days, the audit goes directly to the probate court. Tyler took 2 steps back, staring at me as if seeing a complete stranger. He turned around and walked out the door without another word. The final confrontation occurred 3 weeks later at the annual Chicago Architectural and Engineering Gala. The ballroom at the Palmer House was filled with chandeliers, live jazz, and 400 industry executives. Julian and I stood near our table, speaking with colleagues. Suddenly, my mother appeared, threading her way through the crowd in a floor-length emerald gown. She wore a bright, theatrical smile, opening her arms as she approached our table. "There is my brilliant daughter," Brenda announced loudly, ensuring the surrounding tables turned to watch. "We are so immensely proud of Callie's firm." She moved in for an embrace. I took one deliberate step backward, letting her arms fall empty in the space between us. The surrounding executives fell silent.
"Mom," I said, my voice steady, measured, and clear. "Where were you at 11 o'clock on Saturday morning 3 weeks ago?" Brenda's social smile froze into a brittle mask. "Callie, please, not in front of these people." "Where were you?" I repeated. "I was helping your brother," she whispered, her eyes darting frantically across the room. "He had a crisis. You have a thriving business, a husband, a home. You don't need us." My father, who had been standing 5 paces behind her, stepped forward. For the first time in his life, he didn't look at the floor. "Stop it, Brenda," Paul said, his voice cracking with exhaustion. My mother turned to him, shocked. "Paul?" "We chose Tyler," my father said, looking directly at the colleagues watching him. "We liquidated Clara's money. We left our daughter at the altar because we told ourselves Callie was strong enough to handle being abandoned. We were wrong. We were cowards." The ballroom went completely still. My mother stared at my father, then back at me, the humiliation burning in her cheeks. "So what do you want from us, Callie?" Brenda hissed quietly. I looked at the two of them, felt the last lingering thread of childhood guilt snap clean, and let out a slow, steady breath. "I don't want your money, Mom," I said. "I don't want Dad's career, and I don't want your public apologies. But from this moment forward, you only get as much access to my life as your respect can earn." I turned back to Julian, took his hand, and walked toward the terrace. The aftermath was quiet, orderly, and absolute. My father took early retirement from Midwest Power 6 weeks later. Facing the formal estate audit, my parents sold their vacation cottage in Michigan to repay the $55,000 into Grandma Clara's trust. I transferred every penny of that restored money into an endowed scholarship for young women entering architectural engineering at the University of Illinois. The first time I saw Grandma Clara's name printed on the university program, I stood in the auditorium and felt a quiet, permanent peace settle in my chest. Tyler took a modest salaried job as an on-site property supervisor for a rental management company in Gary, Indiana, spending his weekends managing maintenance tickets and slowly resolving his debts.
My mother still tells relatives that I became distant after marrying into wealth. I no longer spend 5 minutes explaining the truth. I keep my boundaries like iron. If they are respectful, I speak with them at neutral family gatherings. If they cross the line, I walk away. Last week, while unpacking our wedding album, I came across the photograph of the front row. 2 empty chairs. I looked at that picture, and for the first time, I didn't feel a single ounce of pain. I saw the empty seats, and then I remembered Arthur's arm, Sarah holding my bouquet, Julian waiting at the altar, and Grandma Clara's voice echoing across 20 years. Never spend your life looking at who walked out. Look at who stayed. I didn't win because my family was exposed. I won the moment I realized that their presence was never what made me whole. She took the arm of the man who chose to stand. She severed the debt of their manufactured guilt. She said, "My worth was never defined by the people who walked away."